I wish I was kidding. After finally paying off my very first new ride last month, 10 years of nonstop grind, dollar store dinners, and saving every spare dollar, you'd think I'd get a congrats. Instead, I open my mailbox to a lawsuit with my own parents' names on it. Can you believe my own parents, the people who raised me, actually sued me? Not for some huge inheritance, not for some crazy debt, but because I bought a car. I'm telling you, it felt like a betrayal so deep it ripped my world apart. I wish I was kidding. After grinding for 10 brutal years, eating dollar store dinners, and saving every single spare dollar to finally pay off my first new car last month, you'd think I'd get a congrats. Instead, I opened my mailbox to a lawsuit with my own parents' names on it. Imagine that. Working your absolute hardest for a decade, sacrificing everything, finally achieving your biggest dream, only for your own flesh and blood to drag you to court. All because I dared to buy a car. I was 28 when I finally got those keys in my hand. It was a dream I'd spent a brutal decade chasing. 10 years of living on instant noodles, turning down every social invite, working until my eyes burned. When I finally got that car, I felt like I'd conquered the world. 3 weeks later, the court papers arrived. The plaintiffs, my parents, Sarah and David Miller, they were suing me for buying my car. Just let that sink in. Growing up in a middle-class Boston neighborhood, I thought my childhood was normal. My parents, Sarah and David, gave me and my younger brother, Ethan, a comfortable life. A nice suburban home, yearly trips to Cape Cod. We looked like the perfect family from the outside. But beneath that perfect surface, my parents, especially my mother, controlled every single aspect of our lives, particularly our finances. While other kids got allowances they could spend freely, mine came with literal spreadsheets. From age 10, I had to account for every single penny to my mother during our weekly financial reviews. Stephanie, you spent $7 at the mall last Saturday. What did you buy? Mom would ask, peering over her reading glasses at my expense report. Just some hair clips, Mom. They were on sale. Did you need new hair clips? I count 17 in your drawer already. This level of scrutiny followed me right through my teenage years. While I got my first part-time job at 16, my parents insisted I open a joint bank account with them so they could guide my saving habits. What it really meant was they monitored every transaction and questioned anything they deemed unnecessary. My brother Ethan, 2 years younger, handled this micromanagement differently. He embraced it, internalized their values, and became their perfect financial protege. While I dreamed of independence, Ethan seemed comfortable, often reporting my suspicious spending to our parents like some kind of financial hall monitor. When I was 17, I discovered my mother had been opening my mail, including college scholarship offers and financial aid information. The confrontation that followed revealed her true intentions. College is an unnecessary expense, she declared. You can live at home, go to community college, and contribute to the family fund instead. The family fund was something my parents had mentioned more and more as we reached our teens. Apparently, every Miller was expected to contribute a significant portion of their income to this collective pot my parents controlled. Its purpose was conveniently vague, but the expectation was crystal clear. That night, I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I was going to break free from their financial control, whatever it took. I applied for every scholarship imaginable, worked extra shifts, and saved in a secret account I opened, using my friend Maya's address for statements. When acceptance letters arrived, I chose a university 3 states away with the best financial aid package. The night I told my parents I was leaving, my father's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "You're throwing away everything we've built for this family," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "If you walk out that door, don't expect our support." My brother, Ethan, watched from the staircase, his expression a mixture of shock and disapproval. "How could you be so selfish?" he asked later that night. "They just want what's best for us." But I knew better. The next morning, I left for college with 2 suitcases and barely enough money for my first semester's books. What followed were 4 years of extreme financial hardship. I juggled full-time classes with 2 part-time jobs. I lived on the cheapest meal plan, scrounging for extra food from campus events. I never went home for holidays, working instead to earn time and a half pay. My parents' prediction that I'd come crawling back never materialized. Instead, I graduated with honors, a mountain of student debt, and a fierce determination to build my own financial independence, completely on my own terms. The cost was high. By graduation day, I hadn't spoken to my parents in nearly 3 years. Ethan attended my graduation ceremony, but spent most of the time trying to negotiate a reconciliation that always included the same stipulation. I needed to recognize my financial obligation to the family. I refused. As I moved into post-college life, I carried both the burden of being financially alone in the world and the determination that one day I would have something truly mine, something no one could control, monitor, or take away. Little did I know that this dream would eventually lead to facing my own family in court. After college, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Philadelphia. The starting salary was decent, but hardly enough to live comfortably in a major city, especially with $45,000 in student loans hanging over my head. But I had a plan, one that would require extraordinary discipline and sacrifice. I rented a tiny room in a rundown house with 3 other roommates. My space was barely 9 by 7 feet, essentially a converted walk-in closet, but it only cost $400 a month, utilities included. The communal bathroom was always dirty. The kitchen perpetually smelled like burnt curry, and privacy was non-existent. But it was cheap, and cheap was what I needed. My daily routine was brutal. I woke at 5:30 a.m. to commute using the cheapest public transportation, often walking several miles to save on bus fare. My primary job ran from 8:30 to 5:30. But instead of heading home, I'd work at a local coffee shop from 6 to 10 p.m. 3 nights a week. Weekends weren't for relaxation. They were for my retail job at a clothing store where I worked another 16 hours. "You're going to burn yourself out," warned my roommate Chloe, who often found me asleep on my laptop at our tiny kitchen table. Life isn't just about saving money. But for me it was. Every dollar was meticulously accounted for. My budget was a masterpiece of financial restriction. For $100. For rent, $25 for phone, the cheapest prepaid plan, $160 for transportation, $120 for groceries, $380 for student loan payments, $180 for health insurance, $15 for internet, split 4 ways, $50 for miscellaneous necessities. That left approximately $850 each month to save, which I automatically transferred to a high-interest savings account the moment my paycheck hit. I never checked the balance. The temptation to spend would be too great. I just trusted the math and kept going. My meals were a rotating selection of the cheapest possible options. Breakfast was always oatmeal with a spoonful of peanut butter. Lunch was a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. Dinner was often rice with beans or eggs or instant ramen dressed up with frozen vegetables. Once a month, I allowed myself a $10 takeout meal as a reward. Social invitations became a source of anxiety rather than pleasure. When colleagues invited me for happy hour or friends wanted to go to concerts, I became the queen of excuses. "Sorry, I've got a deadline for my freelance client," I'd say. Or, "I'm picking up an extra shift that night." The truth that I couldn't justify spending $15 on a single cocktail when that money could go toward my car fund seemed too difficult to explain. Over time, the invitations dwindled, and my social circle shrank to a handful of understanding friends who were okay with our hangouts being home movie nights where everyone brought their own snacks. My wardrobe consisted of the same 7 outfits rotated throughout the week, all from thrift stores or clearance racks. I cut my own hair. I never took vacations. My one luxury was a $10 monthly streaming service shared with my roommates. 3 years into this lifestyle, I received a promotion that bumped my salary. Instead of upgrading my living situation or relaxing my budget, I simply increased my savings rate. While college friends started buying new cars or taking European vacations, I remained focused on my goal. The isolation was perhaps the hardest part. Dating was nearly impossible, not only because of the financial constraints, but because explaining my lifestyle inevitably led to uncomfortable questions. "Are you in some kind of financial trouble? One date asked after I suggested a free concert in the park instead of the restaurant he'd proposed. No, I replied. I'm just saving for something important. Few understood the depth of my commitment, and fewer still were willing to adapt to my frugal lifestyle. Relationships rarely made it past the third date. By year 5, I had been promoted again and was making more. I also expanded my freelance work, bringing in extra income. My savings were growing faster now, but I maintained the same Spartan lifestyle. The only concession I made was upgrading my health insurance after a scary bout of bronchitis left me with unexpected medical bills. Year 7 brought another significant professional milestone, a job offer from a larger marketing agency with an even higher salary. For the first time, I allowed myself a small celebration. I ordered takeout and ate it on the floor of my studio apartment, calculating how this boost would accelerate my timeline. By the end of year 8, I had moved into a management position, earning a substantial salary plus my established freelance income. My living situation had improved slightly. I now rented a small studio apartment for $750 a month, but otherwise my lifestyle remained largely unchanged. I still tracked every penny, still rarely socialized, still wore the same clothes until they wore out. The sacrifice was taking its toll. I developed insomnia, grinding my teeth at night. I learned through a distant cousin's Facebook post that my brother Ethan had gotten married the previous year. But the numbers in my savings account, which I finally allowed myself to check after year 9, made it all seem worthwhile. I had amassed just over $320,000. Combined with my excellent credit score from years of perfect payment history, I was finally approaching my goal. At the 10-year mark, I reached my target, $350,000 in savings. 10 years and 2 months after graduation, I was ready to begin the car shopping process. The decade of sacrifice was about to pay off. With my savings goal achieved, I allowed myself exactly one night to celebrate. I bought a bottle of champagne, not the expensive kind, old habits die hard, and sat on the floor of my studio, making a list of models to consider. For the first time in a decade, I felt the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen. The next morning, I began researching dealerships. I needed someone who would understand my financial situation and respect my strict budget. After interviewing 3, I chose Maria Sanchez, a straight-talking woman in her 40s who specialized in first-time car buyers. Most people come to me with champagne dreams and beer budgets, she said during our first meeting. You're the opposite. Got a solid budget, but very modest expectations. We'll find you something perfect. Maria's assessment of the market was honest, but encouraging. With my budget, I could afford a decent car, perhaps a brand new, reliable model from a reputable dealership. It wouldn't be a luxury car, but it would be mine. I don't need luxury, I explained. I need solid engineering, reasonable fuel costs, and no major repairs needed in the next 5 years. After a decade of saving, I wasn't about to sink my funds into a money pit. The car shopping process was both exhilarating and exhausting. Over 2 months, I viewed 37 vehicles. Some were eliminated immediately. Rust damage, major engine issues, or too high mileage. Others were tempting, but not quite right. A charming vintage model with unique features, but a transmission that made Maria wince. A spacious SUV with a beautiful interior, but poor fuel economy that would make running costs prohibitively expensive. This is normal, Maria assured me after yet another disappointing showing. Finding the right car is like dating. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. Then on a rainy Tuesday, we visited a modest but well-maintained sedan at a reputable dealership. It wasn't perfect. The upholstery needed updating. The paint had a few minor scratches, and the previous owners had chosen some questionable aftermarket accessories. But the engineering was sound. The tires were only a year old. The engine had been recently serviced, and it had a strong warranty. As I sat in the driver's seat, I could envision what it could become with some detailing and simple upgrades I could do myself over time. The asking price was comfortable within my budget, even after setting aside funds for registration, insurance, and an emergency repair fund. I want to make an offer, I told Maria as we stood beside what would potentially be my new car. Are you sure? We still have 5 more cars to see this week, she reminded me. I nodded. This one feels right. We submitted an offer that evening. The next morning, the seller countered. After a brief negotiation, we settled. The inspection revealed no major issues, just the cosmetic updates I had anticipated. The loan approval process was smooth, thanks to my exceptional credit score and substantial down payment. I opted for a shorter-term loan rather than the standard extended one, another way to save money in the long run. The weeks leading up to closing were filled with paperwork, phone calls, and a growing sense of anticipation. I allowed myself to browse aftermarket parts websites during lunch breaks, planning how I would gradually furnish my new car with personalized touches without breaking my budget. Finally, closing day arrived. I sat at a table surrounded by strangers, signing document after document until my hand cramped. When the dealer's agent handed me the keys, I had to fight back tears. "Congratulations, car owner," Maria said, giving me a quick hug. "You did it." That evening, I drove my new car home. I spent that first night on my air mattress in my apartment, too excited to sleep. I made lists of small projects I could tackle immediately, detailing the interior, replacing worn floor mats, cleaning the engine bay. In the morning, I would buy cleaning supplies and begin making this car truly my own. Over the next few weeks, my colleagues congratulated me, though few understood the magnitude of what I had accomplished. My closest friend, Maya, helped me install a new sound system and detail the interior, expressing amazement at my journey. "I can't believe you did this all on your own," she said as we buffed the dashboard. "No family help, no inheritance, no partners split costs with. Just you." Her words filled me with pride, but they also triggered a realization I had been avoiding. I still hadn't told my family about the car. Despite our estrangement, some part of me had always hoped that achieving this milestone might bridge the gap between us. Perhaps they would finally understand that my rejection of their financial control wasn't about rejecting them as family. After much deliberation, I decided to reach out. I composed a brief email to my parents with a photo of the car, adding that they were welcome to see it if they wished. To Ethan, I sent a similar message with a bit more personal information, hoping my brother might serve as an intermediary. Their responses would shatter any hope of reconciliation and set in motion events I could never have anticipated. 3 days after sending those emails, my phone rang. It was Ethan's number. It was the first time we'd spoken in over 2 years, and my heart raced with nervous anticipation. "Ethan, it's so good to... What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was cold, controlled anger vibrating through each syllable. "Why? What?" "I just wanted to share my news with you, and you bought a car." "With what money, Stephanie?" The question confused me. "With my money. I've been saving for 10 years. Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Right, because an entry-level marketing job pays enough to buy such an expensive car these days." I tried to explain my journey of multiple jobs, the extreme frugality, the promotions, but he cut me off. "Mom and Dad want to see you this Sunday. Family dinner at 6. He hung up before I could respond. That Sunday, I drove the 2 hours to my parents' house with a knot in my stomach. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. The same neatly trimmed hedges, the same beige siding, the same ceramic welcome sign my mother had painted years ago. My father, David, opened the door before I could knock. He'd aged since I'd seen him last. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. "Stephanie." No hug, no smile, just my name. He stepped aside to let me in. In the dining room, my mother Sarah was setting the table with the good china, the set reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Ethan and his wife Olivia sat stiffly on the couch. No one seemed happy to see me. Dinner was a tense affair. We ate my mother's pot, roast in near silence, broken only by Olivia's nervous attempts at small talk about the unusually warm weather. When my mother brought out apple pie for dessert, my childhood favorite, I foolishly thought it might signal a thawing. As I took my first bite, my father cleared his throat. "So, Stephanie, tell us about this car." I described the vehicle with cautious enthusiasm, mentioning the model, its reliability, my plans for upgrades. "And how much did this car cost?" my mother asked, her fork poised halfway to her mouth. $128, $200, I answered honestly. "That's quite a sum," my father said. "And you managed to save this all by yourself?" "With no help." "Yes. I've been working multiple jobs and living extremely frugally. It hasn't been easy, but that's not possible, my mother interrupted, setting down her fork with a sharp clink against the china. Not with your salary and student loans. I've been promoted several times, and I do freelance work on the side. I explained, my appetite disappearing. I can show you my savings records if you don't believe. What we believe, my father said, his voice dangerously quiet, is that you've taken what isn't yours. The accusation hung in the air like a noxious gas. I looked around the table. My father's clenched jaw, my mother's thinned lips, Ethan's refusal to meet my eyes. What are you talking about? I haven't taken anything from anyone. My mother's laugh was brittle. 10 years of not contributing to the family fund. 10 years of keeping what should have been shared. And now you flaunt your selfishness by buying such an extravagant car. I struggled to comprehend. The family fund? But I haven't lived at home or received any financial support from you since I left for college. That's not how family works, Stephanie, my father said. Everyone contributes. Everyone benefits. Your brother has been contributing 30% of his income since he started working. That fund was meant for all of our futures, including yours eventually. But you never told me what the money was for. I protested, and I've been supporting myself entirely. Which was your choice, my mother snapped. But the obligation remains. We calculate you owe approximately $95,000 to the family fund based on what your income should have been these past 10 years. I nearly choked. You expect me to give you $95,000? For what? For your family. Ethan finally spoke. Looking up, disappointment etched across his face. Olivia and I have delayed having children because we're contributing responsibly. We put off buying our own home. Meanwhile, you've been hoarding money for yourself. That's not fair, I said, my voice rising. I worked 3 jobs at times. I lived in a closet-sized room. I ate ramen noodles for years to save this money. And now you'll make it right, my father said firmly. You'll sell the car. Contribute what you owe to the family fund, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped over backward. I will not sell my car. That money is mine. I earned every penny through sacrifice you can't even imagine. My mother's face hardened. Then you leave us no choice. 2 weeks later, a courier delivered legal papers to my apartment. My parents were suing me for $95,000, claiming I had misappropriated family resources and breached family financial agreements. They were demanding that the court place a lien on my new car until I paid what they claimed I owed. I sat on my newly purchased secondhand couch, legal documents trembling in my hands as the full weight of their betrayal crashed over me. The family I had hoped to reconnect with wasn't just rejecting me. They were trying to take from me the one thing I had worked a decade to achieve. The morning after receiving the lawsuit papers, I called in sick to work for the first time in my professional life. I spent hours researching online, trying to understand how my parents could possibly have legal grounds to sue me for money I had earned myself. The concepts I encountered, constructive trusts, implied contracts, familial financial obligations, left me increasingly panicked. Could they really take my car? Could a decade of sacrifice be erased by some obscure legal principle I'd never heard of? By noon, I realized I needed professional help. I couldn't afford an expensive attorney, but I couldn't afford to lose my car either. After calling 8 law firms, I found Daniel Lee, a family law attorney, who offered a free initial consultation. This is unusual, Daniel said, reviewing the lawsuit documents in his modest office later that day. His space was cluttered but organized, much like Daniel himself, with his rumpled suit but sharp eyes. Is it even legal? I asked. They haven't given me any money since I was 18. How can they claim I owe them anything? Daniel leaned back in his chair. They're claiming something called a constructive trust, essentially arguing that there was an implied agreement that you would contribute to this family fund. They're saying your ability to save money was only possible because of the advantages they gave you, raising you, educating you, instilling financial discipline. But that's what parents are supposed to do. I protested. I agree, but family law can get complicated. The good news is their case seems primarily built on emotional appeals rather than solid legal ground. The bad news is defending yourself won't be cheap or quick. Daniel's retainer was $350, money I had earmarked for painting my apartment. I wrote the check with a shaking hand, the first major unplanned expense in over a decade. Over the next few weeks, Daniel helped me prepare my defense. We gathered every financial record I had, bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, documenting my income and savings patterns for the past 10 years. I contacted former roommates who could testify to my frugal lifestyle, employers who could verify my jobs, even the college financial aid office for records showing I had received no parental support. Meanwhile, the lawsuit was taking an emotional toll. I had trouble sleeping, often waking up in a cold sweat from nightmares where I was without my car again. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my already slim frame. Coworkers noticed my distraction, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that my own parents were trying to take my car. 6 weeks after receiving the lawsuit, we had our first court appearance, a preliminary hearing where both sides would present initial arguments. Walking into the courthouse, I spotted my parents and Ethan sitting on a bench in the hallway. My mother wore her church clothes, a conservative blue dress and pearl necklace. My father had on his only suit, the one he wore to funerals and weddings. They looked like respectable, concerned parents, exactly the image they wanted to project. They didn't acknowledge me as I passed. Inside the courtroom, their attorney, Mr. Thompson, was an imposing man in his 60s with a perfectly tailored suit and an air of absolute confidence. As he spoke to the judge, he painted a picture of parents who had sacrificed everything for their children, only to have one child selfishly refuse to participate in the family's financial collective. The Millers created a family fund that all members contribute to. Your Honor, Mr. Thompson explained smoothly. This has been a family tradition explicitly discussed since their children were teenagers. Ethan Miller has faithfully contributed his share. Stephanie Miller not only refused to contribute, but has used family resources, including the financial education and support she received throughout her formative years, to secretly amass wealth for herself alone. The judge, an older woman named Judge Davies, turned her sharp gaze to me. And you're claiming there was no such agreement, Miss Miller? Daniel stood. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that her parents mentioned a family fund, but there was never any agreement that she would contribute. More importantly, she has been financially independent since age 18, receiving no support from her parents during college or beyond. The money she saved was earned entirely through her own hard work, often working 3 jobs simultaneously while living in substandard housing to maximize her savings. The judge reviewed some of the documents we had submitted. You claim to have saved $350,000 for a car down payment while working entry-level jobs. Yes, Your Honor, I replied, finding my voice. I can document every dollar I earned and saved over the past decade. Impressive, if true, she mused before turning back to my parents' attorney. Mr. Thompson, what evidence do you have of this alleged agreement beyond the family's verbal claim? Mr. Thompson presented several exhibits. Birthday cards I had sent years ago mentioning being family-minded, a high school essay I'd written about financial responsibility, family photos showing what he called a close-knit unit with shared values. It seemed flimsy to me, but Judge Davies took it all in without revealing her thoughts. This case requires more detailed examination, she finally said. I'm scheduling a full hearing for next month. In the meantime, no liens will be placed on Ms. Miller's property, but she is ordered not to sell or refinance the car until this matter is resolved. As we left the courtroom, I felt a momentary relief that my car wasn't immediately at risk. But the battle was far from over. Round 1 to us, Daniel said quietly as we gathered our documents. But they're going to come back stronger. They'll likely try to depose some of your friends, colleagues, maybe even your college roommates, looking for any statement you might have made about family financial obligations. The next few weeks were a blur of preparations. I took unpaid time off work to help Daniel prepare our case, further straining my now limited finances. We gathered additional documentation, letters from former employers praising my work ethic, statements from college financial aid officers confirming I had received no parental support, even receipts showing my extreme frugality over the years. My parents' attorneys sent intimidating requests for documents, everything from my childhood diaries to records of every conversation I'd ever had about the family fund. Daniel assured me these were largely scare tactics and helped me respond only to legitimate legal requests. 2 days before the full hearing, I received a text message from Ethan. It's not too late to settle this. Sell the car, contribute what you owe, and we can be a family again. I didn't respond. The morning of the hearing arrived with a knot of anxiety so tight in my stomach that I couldn't eat breakfast. I dressed in the most professional outfit I owned, a navy blue dress I'd found at a consignment shop years ago, kept for important client meetings. The courtroom seemed more crowded this time. My parents had brought several family friends as character witnesses. I recognized my Aunt Martha, who always sided with my parents in any family dispute. There was Pastor Collins from their church, and the Wilsons, longtime neighbors who had watched me grow up. On my side of the courtroom sat two former roommates who had agreed to testify. My first boss, Miss Evans from the marketing firm, and Maya, my closest friend, who had helped me detail my new car. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Family versus chosen family. The hearing began with my parents' testimony. My father spoke about the family's long-standing financial philosophy, claiming it had been clearly communicated to both children from an early age. We always taught our children that family comes first, he said solemnly. Financial resources are to be shared for the collective good. Stephanie understood this principle. She simply chose to reject it when it suited her. My mother's testimony was more emotional. She described sacrifices they had made for my education, the financial wisdom they had tried to impart, and her heartbreak at my betrayal. We only want what's fair, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Ethan and Olivia have delayed starting their family to meet their obligations. Stephanie needs to do the same. Their attorney presented enlarged photographs of family dinners, holiday gatherings, and my high school graduation, attempting to establish the image of a close, conventional family with shared values and expectations. He introduced financial records showing Ethan's regular contributions to the family fund and contrasted them with my absence of contributions. When it was our turn, Daniel started with a straightforward question to my mother. Mrs. Miller, you claimed that Stephanie has an obligation to contribute to the family fund based on benefits she received growing up. Is that correct? Yes, of course. And would you say providing food, shelter, education, and guidance are things parents are legally obligated to provide for their children? My mother shifted uncomfortably. Well, yes, but so you're seeking financial compensation for fulfilling your legal obligations as parents? That's not. You're twisting my words, my mother protested. Daniel moved on to my father. Mr. Miller, did you provide any financial support to Stephanie during her college years? She chose to attend an expensive, out-of-state university against our advice. My father replied stiffly. We would have supported her if she had followed our financial plan. So that's a no then, Daniel clarified. And since her college graduation, have you provided her with any financial assistance whatsoever? Housing, health insurance, car payments? No, but thank you. That's all I needed to establish. My former roommate, Chloe, testified next, describing our cramped living conditions and my extreme frugality. Stephanie never ate out, never bought new clothes, worked all the time. We used to worry about her because she never did anything fun. It was all work and save, work and save. Miss Evans, my first boss, spoke about my work ethic. Stephanie was always the first to volunteer for overtime. She took on projects no one else wanted for the extra compensation. Many times I found her working through lunch or staying late without even claiming the hours. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. The initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something harder, more resolute. Miss Miller, Daniel began, could you explain to the court how you saved enough money to purchase your car? I detail my financial journey, the multiple jobs, the tiny living spaces, the years of ramen noodles, and declined social invitations. I explain my budgeting system, the automatic transfers to savings, the promotions I had earned through dedication and hard work. Did your parents provide any financial assistance during this 10-year period? Daniel asked. None. I said firmly. I have been completely financially independent since I left for college at 18. And was there ever an explicit agreement that you would contribute to this family fund? No. It was mentioned as something they expected, but I never agreed to it. After I left for college, they made it clear that I was on my own financially if I didn't follow their plans. My parents' attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, attempting to trip me up by suggesting I had benefited from family financial wisdom and privileges that enabled my savings. Isn't it true, he asked with a smug smile, that the very financial discipline you used to save this money was instilled by your parents? I paused, considering my answer carefully. The financial discipline my parents taught me was about control, not independence. What I did, working multiple jobs, living in substandard conditions, sacrificing any quality of life for a decade, was not what they taught me. That I learned on my own out of necessity. The turning point came during my mother's recall testimony. Attempting to strengthen their case, she made a critical mistake. Stephanie has always been financially irresponsible, she claimed. In college, she was constantly asking for money for emergencies. We helped her numerous times. Daniel pounced. Mrs. Miller, you previously testified under oath that you provided no financial support to your daughter during college. Now you're claiming you did. Which statement is true? My mother flushed, looking to their attorney for help. Well, there might have been a few small loans. Do you have records of these loans? Receipts? Bank transfers? Daniel pressed. It was cash, my mother said weakly. Family doesn't keep receipts. No further questions, Daniel said, sitting down with a satisfied nod to me. In her closing statement, Judge Davies's expression gave nothing away. She reviewed the evidence presented, noted the contradictions in my parents' testimony, and acknowledged that the money I saved was earned through my own labor, without parental support or contribution. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed. She looked directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, while families may have their own internal expectations, this court cannot and will not enforce alleged agreements that have no legal basis and appear to be primarily about control, rather than genuine family welfare. The gavel came down with a definitive crack that seemed to echo the breaking of whatever tenuous family bond had remained. The immediate aftermath of the judge's ruling was a blur. Daniel shook my hand firmly, his usually serious face breaking into a satisfied smile. Congratulations, your car is safe. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I glanced across the courtroom to where my parents sat. My mother's face buried in her hands, my father's arm around her shoulders, his expression stony. Ethan stood nearby, whispering something to their attorney, occasionally shooting glances in my direction. As I gathered my documents, a court officer approached. Miss Miller, your family is being escorted out separately to avoid any confrontation. You can leave through the main doors in about 10 minutes. I nodded numbly, thanking him for the consideration I hadn't thought to request. Daniel helped me pack our evidence into my worn messenger bag, giving me practical advice about filing the judgment and ensuring the case was formally closed in the property records. Will they appeal? I asked quietly. They could try, but they don't have grounds. The judge was very clear, Daniel assured me. This is over, Stephanie. You won. Yet victory felt nothing like I'd imagined. As I waited for my parents to leave, I sat alone in the now empty courtroom. The magnitude of what had happened settled over me. I had not only fought my family in court, but had publicly exposed the dysfunction that had shaped my life. There would be no reconciliation, no happy family dinners, no healing of old wounds. When I finally left the courthouse, I stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight, feeling both lighter and heavier, free from the immediate threat, but burdened by the finality of the family rupture. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps rapidly approaching from behind. Stephanie, wait. It was Ethan's voice. I turned, instinctively tensing. He stopped a few feet away, his face flushed, either from running or emotion. How could you do that to them? Do you have any idea how this makes them look? The embarrassment you've caused. I studied my brother's face. The familiar features contorted with an anger that seemed to come from a place of genuine hurt. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I been too harsh, too uncompromising? Then I remembered the past decade of sacrifice, the lonely holidays, the meals skipped to save a few dollars, the nights spent working until exhaustion while my peers built careers, relationships, lives, all leading to the moment when my own parents tried to take it all away through legal manipulation. How could I? I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. How could they sue their own daughter for money she earned herself? How could you support them in this? It was never about the money, Ethan insisted, lowering his voice as a couple walked past us on the courthouse steps. It's about family loyalty, about putting the collective good above individual desires. No, Ethan, it's about control. It always has been. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. You've always been selfish, always thinking just about yourself. Is that what you don't understand? I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I understand that mom and dad have convinced you that family means surrendering your autonomy. That love is conditional on compliance. That's not family, Ethan. That's control. His face hardened. You think you're so much smarter than everyone else? So independent. But when you're alone in that car you bought with your precious money, who will be there for you? Who will care? The question hit its mark, probing the fear that had haunted me through years of solitary saving. But I had an answer now. People who love me without conditions, I said quietly. Friends who support my dreams instead of trying to own them. That's the family I've built while you were busy being the perfect son. Ethan stepped back as if I'd physically pushed him. They're right about you. You're not just selfish, you're cruel. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, and I meant it. My door is always open if you ever want to have a relationship that isn't defined by mom and dad's rules. But I won't apologize for building a life on my own terms. He turned away without another word, walking quickly toward the parking lot where our parents presumably waited. I watched him go, the last fragile thread connecting me to my biological family, severing with each step he took. That evening, I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the sparse furnishings I had carefully selected for my apartment. The victory felt both profound and painful. I had defended my right to the fruits of my labor, but at the cost of any hope for family reconciliation. I reached for my phone and called Maya. It's over, I told her when she answered. I won. That's amazing, she exclaimed. We should celebrate. I'll bring champagne, the good kind this time. I found myself smiling despite everything. Could you also bring those friends you mentioned? The ones who are good with auto detailing? I think it's time I finally finished personalizing my car. 2 hours later, my empty living room was filled with Maya and 4 of her friends, all armed with cleaning supplies, pizza, and genuine congratulations. As we worked on detailing my new car in the garage, the soft gleam I had carefully selected months ago, I realized something important. Family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose, and who chooses you back. The weeks following the court victory brought a strange mixture of peace and pain. With the legal threat removed, I could finally focus on truly settling into my life. I detailed my car's interior and exterior with products I had meticulously researched for the perfect shine and protection. I scoured thrift stores and clearance sales for apartment furniture that expressed my personal style rather than just meeting minimal functional needs. Slowly, my car and my apartment began to feel like my own, earned through sacrifice and protected through determination. But the emotional aftermath of the court battle lingered. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing from dreams where I was back in that courtroom, my parents' accusations echoing off the walls. I checked my phone compulsively, part of me still hoping for a message from Ethan that never came. Maya noticed my struggle during one of our weekly dinner nights, a new tradition where friends took turns hosting simple meals in their homes. You on the case, Steph, but you're still fighting something, she observed as she helped me wash dishes after everyone else had left. Have you thought about talking to someone professionally? I had resisted the idea initially. Therapy seemed like an unnecessary expense after a decade of extreme frugality. But the persistent emptiness inside me couldn't be filled with a new car or fresh apartment paint. After researching affordable options, I found Dr. Emily Chin, a therapist who offered sliding scale fees for her services. Family estrangement is its own kind of grief, Dr. Chin explained during our first session. You're mourning not just the relationship you had, but the relationship you wished you could have had. Over the next several months, our weekly sessions helped me process the complex emotions I had suppressed during my 10-year saving journey. I hadn't just been accumulating money. I'd been building a wall around my heart, protecting myself from the conditional love that had shaped my childhood. Your parents' attempt to control your finances wasn't really about money, Dr. Chin suggested one afternoon. Money was just the tool they used to demand compliance and punish independence. Then why do I still feel guilty? I asked, like I've done something wrong by keeping what I earned. Because they programmed that response in you from childhood, she said gently. Questioning their authority, even as an adult, triggers that old guilt. That doesn't mean the guilt is justified. Alongside therapy, I slowly expanded my social circle. The friends who had stood by me during the court case became regular fixtures in my life. We started a monthly dinner club that rotated between our homes. I joined a community garden 3 blocks from my apartment, finding unexpected joy in growing my own vegetables. 6 months after the court case, I received an unexpected text message from Ethan. Can we talk? We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. The conversation was awkward, stilted with unspoken hurt and lingering disagreements. But it was a start. I'm not saying Mom and Dad were right, he said, staring into his coffee cup. But I don't think you understand how your leaving affected them. Affected all of us. I didn't leave the family, Ethan, I replied carefully. I left their control. There's a difference. He didn't agree, but he didn't argue either. We parted with a tentative plan to meet again the following month. A small bridge beginning to form over the chasm between us. My parents remained distant. Through Ethan, I learned they had told extended family that I had legal troubles, but didn't specify the nature of the court case. The family narrative had been rewritten to preserve their image while casting me as the problematic child. It hurt, but with Dr. Chin's help, I was learning to separate their perception from my reality. You can't control their story about you, she reminded me. You can only live your truth and let the results speak for themselves. And the results were speaking. A year after winning the court case, I received a significant promotion at work. The car I had fought so hard to keep was a testament to my perseverance. I had even started a small emergency fund for others in situations like mine, people escaping financially controlling relationships who needed temporary support. The most profound change, however, was internal. The anxious vigilance that had driven me through a decade of extreme saving had gradually softened. I learned to enjoy small pleasures without guilt. A meal at a nice restaurant to celebrate a work achievement, a weekend trip with friends to a nearby beach, flowers for my kitchen table just because they made me smile. Financial independence isn't just about having money, I realized during one therapy session. It's about having the freedom to use resources in alignment with your own values, without seeking permission or approval. 18 months after the court case, Ethan and Olivia had their first child, a daughter they named Clara. The birth announcement came with an invitation to meet my niece, one I accepted with both excitement and trepidation. In their modest apartment, holding the tiny bundle that was my niece, I felt a new chapter beginning. Ethan and I had established careful boundaries around topics like money and our parents, creating a fragile but growing relationship, independent of the family dynamics that had separated us. She has your nose, I told him, smiling down at Clara's sleeping face. Poor kid, he joked. A glimpse of the brother I remembered from before money and control had come between us. As for my parents, the distance remained. I sent them a card with my niece's birth, expressing joy for the new addition to the family. They didn't respond directly, but they didn't return it either, a minute crack in the wall between us that might someday allow for more light to pass through. 2 years after purchasing my car, I hosted a party to celebrate, inviting the friends who had become my chosen family. As we gathered in the backyard of my apartment building, where I had finally installed a small herb garden I had dreamed about during those lean years, I looked around at the life I had built. Not just the physical car, but the community, the career, the sense of self that no one could take away. Maya raised her glass for a toast. To Stephanie, who taught us all that true ownership isn't just about the thing you buy, but the freedom you create through courage and perseverance. Later that evening, as the last guest departed, I sat alone on my porch swing, a birthday gift from my friends, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The decade of sacrifice, the painful family confrontation, the ongoing work of healing. The hardest lesson hadn't been how to save money or how to defend myself in court. It had been learning that sometimes the people who should support you most are the ones you need to establish the firmest boundaries with. That true family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by respect and unconditional support. That independence, financial and emotional, is not selfish, but necessary for authentic relationships. My car sat proudly in its parking spot, a symbol not just of my journey, but of the person I had become through adversity. A person who knew her worth, who understood the difference between sacrifice and surrender, who recognized that the most valuable thing she owned wasn't the vehicle, but the freedom it represented.